Welcome to Do Your Dailies, the podcast designed to help you on your journey of addiction recovery. We're going to go through the big book of AA and use our collective experience, strength, and hope to help you understand what addiction recovery really looks like. So grab some snacks, sit back, press play, and dig deep. Thanks for being here. Hey everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Do Your Dailies podcast. I'm your host, Chris, and joined by my friends Joe and Dave. Fellas, how are you today?
Doing well. Thanks, Chris.
Oh, I'm just grand. Had a good hike this morning, saw Mother Nature, and ready to rock and roll.
Good deal. Good deal. To our listeners, we are so grateful that you're here, that you continue pressing play. And we hope this is of great benefit to you. And just a reminder that you can find your own big book on our mobile app that's free, Hobble Creek Behavioral Health. And if that doesn't seem to work and you're local here, you can come down to our office, and that contact info is all around you as you scroll through this podcast or follow links, and we'll give you a hard copy. We're very excited to bring this message to you, and as we sit together, the three of us, and talk about our own experiences in recovery and the work that we've done over, my goodness, if we could calculate the number of decades, just being in the rooms and interacting with people. We've seen a lot. And so we're truly hopeful and optimistic that this is of benefit to you, that this will improve your life, improve your recovery, improve your relationships, and your satisfaction in life. So, why don't we dig in right here, the middle of page 14.
Can I, before we go there, can I just interject something?
Please do.
This is part of the story, folks, and I just want to remind us where we are. So, Bill he's had this visit from his good friend, and he talked about his mind being snapped shut, and old thoughts, old feelings, he calls them prejudice. And then the friend drops a bomb on him and says, why don't you choose your own conception of God? And that really shook him. And then he came all the way around to the point where he said this, and this is very powerful. He said, God is concerned with us humans when we want him enough. And then it said, at long last, I saw, I felt, I believed. And then these old thoughts started to fall away. But there was a critical ingredient here that he talked several times about, and it's willingness. He calls it humble willingness, entire willingness, plus enough willingness, honesty, and humility to go on. So he's in this deep transitional mode right now. And then he makes another very important statement that we use often. And this is a simple program, but it's not easy. And what is the not easy part? And a lot of it has to do with our ego. And then he's very personal. He gets very, very intimate. And he said, followed by such a peace and serenity, there was utter confidence. I felt lifted up as though a great clean wind of a mountaintop blew through and through. I suspect most of us have been somewhere on the beach or a mountain or somewhere where there's been a great clean wind, not one that blows us over, not a hurricane, but so he gives us that metaphor, and that wind is a cleansing process, and so he's about to tell us again how to become cleansed, how to pivot, how to become different. And so when Chris mentioned this, finally he shook his head. He's talking about the doctor that was looking at him, and the doctor can't even explain this. All he knows is that he knows Bill, and the Bill of the past is not what he's looking at. He's looking at a completely different individual, the same physically, but attitudinally and just the spirit, just his countenance, all of it is changed. And I'm so grateful that as he's writing this, he went back and he gave us these little tidbits. So I just want to kind of bridge from where we were to where we are today. And there's some powerful things that he talks about in the next couple of pages of his story.
I love it.
Okay, I'll start.
That'll be great, Joe. Thanks.
Okay. Finally, he shook his head, saying, "Something has happened to you I don't understand. But you had better hang on to it. Anything is better than the way you were. The good doctor now sees many men who have had such experiences. He knows that they are real. While I lay in the hospital, the thought came that there were thousands of hopeless alcoholics who might be glad to have what had been freely given me. Perhaps I could help some of them. They in turn might work with others." My friend had emphasized the absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles in all my affairs. Particularly was it imperative to work with others as he had worked with me. "Faith without works is dead," he said, and how appallingly true for the alcoholic. For if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. If he did not work, he would surely drink again, and if he drank, he would surely die. Then faith would be dead indeed. With us, it is just like that. I think that emphasis about taking the message and the experience and freely giving it to another human being, that is so incredibly valuable for what he's about to share with us. But he's emphasizing that his friend emphasized this to him and encouraged him to actually do this. And I really think he was bought into the idea that if he didn't do this, if he didn't enlarge his spiritual life, that he was going to drink again. And he knew that to drink again was the demise of everything that he had been working for, specifically his relationship with his wife. And he didn't want to lose that. So here we are. And he jumps into that very experience of like, what does this look like? Why are we extending an invitation to take this message and share it with other alcoholics? And this is what he shares with us about his experience.
Just a comment about the good doctor. He says something has happened to you, so he could see it.
Oh, yeah.
Clearly.
Yeah.
I can see something right in front of me. And to his credit, he said very clearly, "I don't understand. But you had better hang on to it." So whatever this is, Bill Wilson, that you've got going, I don't understand it, but I see it. And he was seeing many other men, and he knew those experiences were real. And in my mind, he literally supported and co-signed what Bill was doing. So Bill had this unexplainable experience, and now his good doctor is saying, "I'm seeing it in you. Don't ask me to explain it because I can't. Mm-hmm. It's of a higher nature. It's something different." And that's why a little later he says, "Enlarge his spiritual life." So in other words, he's saying, what's happened to me is wonderful, but it's just the beginning. And what did I have to do to get it? And what do I have to do to enlarge it? Mm-hmm. Enlarge means not keep the status quo. I got to do, I want more, bigger, better. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's interesting in his experience is he's in the hospital and he starts having these profound insights, specifically that there's not just one or two more of people out there that are suffering. He said he had the concept of thousands of these men like me are out there that need this message. He starts transcending his own personal experience, and then he starts realizing there really is a movement that needs to take place, and there are thousands of men that need the experience that I have had. And I think that's the point where he's really bought into the concept that he needs to turn over a new leaf, and he needs to really get into this piece of service, because without it, he's already said those who don't are surely to drink again, and that means that he's surely going to die. Mm-hmm. So
I think it's very important where he says, if he did not work.
Yeah.
In other words, this is not a one-off. I was in the hospital and the wind blew through me, and hey, I'm good, I've got it.
Yeah.
Not even close. He said, if I did not work, I would surely drink. And why did he say that? Why could with certainty could he make such a statement that if he did not work, he would surely drink, and if he drank, he would die? Because all he has to do is look at his own story.
Right.
Yeah.
I know multiple times when he was about ready to tap out, he said, "Should I kill myself earlier?" No, not today.
Right.
And so he knows this isn't just hearsay. Right. He's looking back at his own experience, his own history, and saying, "Okay, I've got a toehold on this, and if I keep going, I could make it. But if I don't work, and what's the definition of work? I've got it circled. If he did not work, in other words, do the steps, at depth, do this work." And so that's what he's talking about. It's not work harder at the office or work harder on his yard. It's the internal work that must be done.
Well, in this previous part, the faith without works is dead. We've heard that before, and we can define it in a variety of ways, but I think the number of times that we collectively say, "I'll never do that again. I'm done. I got this." And there's that pink cloud. There's that, goodness, the word is escaping me right now. Complacency. There's this desire to be well, to be healthy, to be better, and all those things.
Yeah.
But we don't understand and fully comprehend what it takes to do that, to maintain that. And so, I'm facing some kind of consequence, destruction or whatever, and I'm willing to, God, I'll do whatever it takes. Just save me from this. Just give me one more chance. And then I'm saved or whatever. And I go, I did that myself. Maybe we minimize or forget the impact that somebody else's support or our spirituality had on us.
I really like the way that idea is coming across to me right now, because it's like that's very much like what he's saying. If we don't enlarge this concept of our spiritual connection, and that journey that we have to actually have within ourselves to actually go deep and start really digging into, like, why do I do the things I do? I think we get lost in the ego that says, "Oh, I handled that just fine. I can do it on my own," and that unfortunately is problematic for so many different reasons. Is because we don't give credit to the power and the influence that alcohol truly has on us. When we talk about the obsession of the mind, I mean, that thing is a beast, and it's not something I have the power to wrestle with. I know that already, so when we get into that egotistical state, it's like we aren't concerned about the other people. We're not concerned about anybody but like feeding the beast and like feeding the alcoholic torture that we've already gone through, but will continue to go through because of how the manifestation of the allergy of the body, the obsession of the mind, and the spiritual malady just absolutely play us. So when we're invited to truly enlarge this aspect of our life, I mean, it takes nothing less than that internal work that Dave was talking about and doing that step work, because if we don't find a way of deflating the ego, it's going to convince us that we've got control again. It's going to help us like put on the blinders and say, "Look at what I did." And then it's going to convince us that we've got power and control again. And then we're going to go right back to where we were. In fact, on that note, I think it's a great opportunity to read the next paragraph, because that's literally what Bill is going to like expound to us.
Well,
So
he says in there it was imperative that he works with others.
Yeah.
Why is that imperative? Why would he say such a thing?
His life is in the balance.
His life is in the balance, and I can't teach what I don't have. So I got to be on my game. And then there's nobody like a drug addict or an alcoholic. When you're trying to talk to them, they can sniff out, BS.
Yeah.
I mean, in a heartbeat. So he knows that, hey, I've had this experience, but I got to be spot on, and I'm going to go help them. But if I'm not speaking my truth, they'll throw me out. And then he goes on and he gives us a very, very succinct result if we don't do it. If he drank, he would surely die. And with us, it's just like that.
Yeah.
So what he's really saying is if I don't pivot and shift and do something different, I'm done. And I think at this point, he knew he was just preciously close.
Yes.
To being done, to just tapping out. And he'd either lose his brain or, have to go to an insane asylum, whatever. But with us, it's just like that. So he's very candid and straightforward about if not A, then B, and this is what B looks like, period.
Yeah. Okay, so jumping back into it, my wife and I abandoned ourselves with enthusiasm to the idea of helping other alcoholics to a solution of their problems. And this is where I think for me, I just eat this up every time I read it. It was fortunate for my old business associates remained skeptical for a year and a half, during which I found little work. I was not too well at the time, and I was plagued by waves of self-pity and resentment. This sometimes nearly drove me back to drink. But I soon found that when all other measures failed, work with another alcoholic would save the day. Many times I had gone to my old hospital in despair. On talking to a man there, I would be amazingly lifted up and set on my feet. It was a design for living that works in rough going. So he fully admits that he's in this precipice for a year and a half of like little to no work. And the only thing that really he's clearly painting for us is that his life is filled with ups and downs. And when he gets down, he gets to that point where he is seriously considering about returning to his old pattern of behavior, drinking and just going into oblivion. And he found that the only thing that really worked for him was his service piece, sharing his story, sharing his experience, and inviting others to do similar to what's literally been mirrored for him by Ebby. And then all of a sudden, every time he's found in a situation where he's shaky, he does service and he finds a foundation. He doesn't say that, but he does basically say that it sets his feet on something that he didn't have before. And he said it's a design for living that works in rough going. I think most addicts and alcoholics, that's what we need. We need a design that will work, whether or not things are easy or hard, but will get us through circumstances and situations that are difficult, challenging, and at times impossible, because that's kind of how I take what he's sharing with us, is that his experience was nothing less than a miraculous demonstration that as you work this program, miracles will occur. And he didn't drink, but yet everybody else around him is like looking at him, just waiting to watch him just fall. And he doesn't. Any insights?
Yeah, he said it is a design for living that works. A design. What does design mean? Purposeful, written down, consistent. It's organized. There's a process. And he reiterates what was said in the doctor's opinion, and then he actually uses it again over on page 28. We'll eventually get there. A design for living. So those three words, a design for living. And so he's attached to this and sharing it with us, that this is not just something you do on Thursday evening at 7. Mm-hmm. This is now becoming a lifestyle.
Let me ask you guys your thoughts on this, if I can. What is the difference between somebody who's in the rough going and needs to get into the service and help another person, right? Lose themselves in that service. And then somebody who their circumstances are so bleak that they would be unsafe being around others. Does it make sense? Mm-hmm. If I go to the meeting and I'm intoxicated, what are the limitations? What are my kind of the social limitations for me? What's appropriate and what's inappropriate? I'm showing up to the meeting, but I just put back a 12-pack, a 24-pack. I'm impaired, I'm drunk, I'm high, but that the intention to get well is there. Maybe there's a realization of, I messed up. I blew it. I got to get back on track. And I read in the big book, get lost in the service of others. Do that work. What do I need to remind myself of, or what are my limitations so that I don't hurt another, that I don't jeopardize someone else's recovery? Is there a time frame? Is there something that needs to change internally? How would you advise somebody in that situation?
Well, I have some experiences with that. So if someone's intoxicated, my rule became I'd get phone calls all through the night, drunk people, and there's no talking to them. Hello, Dave, and I can tell within a word or two. At that point, it's been my experience that anything I might say is not going to be remembered and can definitely do more harm than good. So I'm going to call you tomorrow. Are you safe? So I put it back, are you safe right now? Let's talk tomorrow. But you need to be, you're still going to be hungover, but at least you can hear what I have to say. And I was sitting in a meeting, a guy walked in, and I could tell something was off. And he sat down, and he introduced himself, and he said, I've got 12 hours. So I looked at him, and I said, it's been 12 hours since you had a drink? And he said, yes. And so I just started asking him a few questions, just to kind of gauge, okay, are you here with us, or do I need to escort you out? Because what you're not going to do in a drunken state is come in and tear up our meeting.
Right.
We're here for a reason.
Yeah.
You're in an altered state, and, we looked at each other, and I said, I'll do this. And we have to make a determination, because you can't let the one destroy the group, but you can't let the group, throw somebody out. And he was not in a good place. And so, we had to make some changes. Now, you go and talk to them and so forth. But here's my question. You walked in this way. Did you walk here or did you drive here?
Yeah.
In my opinion, I've got a responsibility. You can't drive. So wherever you need to go, I'm going to drive you, but you can't drive. And if you do, I will call the police. I'm not going to, I don't want you to get drunk driving, but you got to shut this process down. Let's end it now while it's harmless. And so I've also seen people in meetings that were so distraught and so upset, and you just go and you can see them walk in, and you just, okay, and then go over and say, hey, come sit by me. You want to be here? Yeah, I need to be. Well, there's a difference between need to and want to. And I have found that just talking through, sometimes let's just step outside, let's just talk for a minute. I'm not trying to hide the meeting from you or anything, but, just, I guess what I would say, to answer your question, go over to page 86. Right at the very bottom, in thinking about our day, we may face indecision. In other words, I don't know what to do, what is best. And what I can tell you, it says, we may not be able to determine which course to take. Here we ask God. All right? So what am I about to say? Sometimes I've had to just put my head down and say, what do you want me to know about this person right now, and what do you want me to do? And that paragraph goes on to say sometimes, it takes a while. It's been my experience that many, 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 many times the answers come right now. God, I'm willing to go in on this.
Yeah.
There's a person in need, and I'm here, and I made a vow that I'd always be, put my hand on the oar. So what do I need to know about that person? And what do you want me to do? And what I will tell you is that promise has come true many, many, many times. And to walk up to someone, and it's all about presentation. Hey, Chris, good to see you. Are you all right? Good? Yeah. Well, can we talk for a minute? I'm concerned about you. How can I help you? Just that question alone. How can I help you? I'm not going to say it disarms people, but it a lot of times it takes the edge off. I'm here. There was a time, and you guys both know it, we had these reunions at this treatment center, and people would show up intoxicated to a reunion. Dave would go, yeah, I know. Hey, let's go talk. We stood outside, and so I think the reason he puts that promise in there is because he knows what some of us are going to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's his answer? I don't know. Ask God. He knows. If it were left to my smallness, the size of my brain and heart, there'd be a lot of trouble out there. But if I inquire and bring in some powers, and all I'm suggesting is the same power that lifted him up and felt like a great clean wind, why can that power not also help me with the guy that walked into a meeting that might need something else? Maybe he just needs to go out and talk for a minute. Because the truth is, in a meeting, you're going to listen. He can't hear sometimes. Maybe he just needs to talk and get it off his chest. So you have a meeting during the meeting.
Yeah.
But I try to defer and say, just take a moment, put my head down and say, I need some help right now to help that guy. I'm willing to help him, but I need to know what you want. And that may sound a bit strange. That's why I do it.
Thanks for that perspective. I think there are those times where somebody might not necessarily be the sponsor or the helper, but when we've decided that we want to get well and we jump past all the steps, trying to then jump to step 12 before we've done our own work. And that's one area that I want to throw caution to people. Slow down. You don't need to be anyone else's saving grace. You're worth the work. And if there is a mistake that's made, if there is a lapse or relapse or whatever you want to call that, if you're in a bad spot, we certainly don't want you to be alone, but also be mindful that you shouldn't speak at the meeting. Don't get up there and lecture everybody, right? So how do we keep that person part of the fold?
Well,
How do we invite them in with appropriate boundaries?
I think one of the things that's come to mind for me is the word and the concept of showing up. It's like when we show up to a meeting, I never think that I'm just going to a meeting for myself. I think more often than not, I'm going to receive a message of strength and hope that hopefully just inspires me. But with that same concept of showing up, when we have the opportunity to cross the path of somebody that's right in the midst of their sickness and is still in that state of suffering, for me the thought often crosses my mind, similar to Dave too, is like, pray, get inspiration. But one of the things that I've experienced is like that extension of love and the encouragement at the end of a meeting of encouraging them to come back, and follow that up with, let us love you until you can love yourself. I mean, that was extended to me in my early recovery. Those are the things that I strive to instill in the people that I've crossed paths with in meetings that have come in that are still in an altered state. I think the one thing that a lot of people in that state are dealing with is they're dealing with a lot of contempt for themselves. They're not quite yet in that state of like really allowing themselves to love themselves. And for me, what I have found is obviously the encouragement of inviting them to listen, but to ask questions later, but also to encouraging them as strongly as possible to continue showing up themselves, because their life will transform if they do it. I've been in numerous circumstances and situations after a meeting, going up to a brother or sister that's really suffering and just inviting them to come back, and to a few times even sharing more of my personal journey and encouraging them that this too will pass, but in order for it to pass, they need to be open to loving themselves. And if they can't do that, allowing themselves to feel what was in that meeting. Because I typically don't go to meetings and have a bad experience. I actually have an inspiring experience that inspires me more often than not to keep going back. And that hopefully is the spirit that I want to share with somebody that's in that space. And hopefully it has that ability to draw them into being open to having more of that experience. And that's what Bill's talking about when he says it's a design for living that works in rough going. It's like that association with people that have a common goal for a common problem, and that we're all in the boat. It's just some of us tend not to want to see the boat and just to say, I'm in this ocean. And that's been my experience. So,
thank you, guys. Let's keep going.
Okay. We commenced to make many fast friends, and a fellowship has grown up among us, of which is a wonderful thing to feel a part. The joy of living we really have, even under pressure and difficulty. I have seen hundreds of families set their feet in the path that really goes somewhere. Have seen the most impossible domestic situations righted, feuds and bitterness of all sorts wiped out. I've seen men come out of asylums and resume a vital place in the lives of their families and communities. Business and professional men have regained their standing. There is scarcely any form of trouble and misery which has not been overcome among us. In one Western city and its environs, there are 1,000 of us and our families. We meet frequently so that newcomers may find the fellowship they seek. At these informal gatherings, one may often see from 50 to 200 persons. We are growing in number and power. An alcoholic in his cup is an unlovable creature. Our struggles with them are various, strenuous, comic, and tragic. One poor chap committed suicide in my home. He could not or would not see our way of life. There is, however, a vast amount of fun about it all. I suppose one would be shocked at our seeming worldliness and levity. But just underneath there is a deadly earnestness. Faith has to work 24 hours a day in and through us, or we perish. Most of us feel we need look no further for utopia. We have it with us right here and now. Each day, my friends, simply talk in our kitchen multiplies itself in a widening circle of peace on earth and goodwill to men. Boy, that last part of his story, for me, just every time I read it, it really touches me, because that struggle for his first year and a half, I relate to. And it's the only thing that he found really that sustained him was working with others and talking about and sharing his story and inviting others to do the same thing that Ebby invited him to do. Just do your work, dig in, go on this journey, and watch as things progress. And what's fascinating to me is what we just read is that part where he clearly says, let me get back to it. Business and professional men have regained their standing. There is scarcely any form of trouble and misery which has not been overcome among us. And that when he says scarcely any form of trouble or misery has not been overcome, that's the work that we've been talking about and that we've read over. The steps are designed to get us out from underneath the burden that we create for ourselves, and that is created by the environment of how we interact with other people, to allow the burden to be lifted and removed. And for me, I can honestly say I've experienced that. And that's literally something later on as we get into the promises that I believe is that I don't think that there's anything that an addict and alcoholic that's dealing with can't overcome if they're truly willing to search within themselves and get honest. I mean, completely honest. No reservations, no secrets, just that honest truth of this is who I am and this is what I've created.
It's encouraging. There's hope that no matter where I've been, no matter what I've done, it's not over. It doesn't have to be over. I can be changed. I matter. And I think it's very, very common for people to feel the opposite of that they've done too many things. They've gone too far. There's no salvation. There's no change. And it's just not true. I think part of the kind of the attack that the brain does, the insidious part of the brain that tells somebody they're not good enough, that they're not worthy, that no one will love them, that so on and so forth, all that negative self-talk. And usually it's a lot more vulgar than that. Mm-hmm. It's just false. But it takes a lot of effort.
Well, I think he chooses those two words, deadly earnestness. Because I've heard many times, sobriety is boring. Well, if anyone were honest and they look at the last 3, 4, 6 months of their drinking and using, there's nothing fun about that. No. There's no party. Nobody's showing up. Nobody's coming to film them to put them on a commercial for beer, Corona. That's not the way it works. But he's saying deadly earnestness. Now, it's interesting. At the end of his story, he still goes back and refers to what he saw, the miracle, as he called it, at his kitchen table. In Eddie's countenance and all of that. Now, deep down in him, he's saying, I don't know what that is, but I want some of that. Because I know who Eddie was. And it's not the guy I'm looking at. So whatever happened to him, I want that. Well, he at the time wasn't clear on what needed to be done. He couldn't have defined the deadly earnestness, but now he can. The process. So the hope, yes, but the hope is strong because of the strategy that you go through to build the hope. And he had seen it at his own kitchen table. Now what do I need to do? Each day, my friends, simple talk in our kitchen multiplies itself. So what he's saying there is you got to go talk about your experience. Then later talks about the number, I think number 3 made the comment that those guys drank just like I did. In other words, because we isolate, nobody's like this. I look at the stack of problems that I've got, nobody would understand, and you find out, oh, wait a minute. So this was a long time ago. Yeah, I don't have revisionist history on this. I know what happened. I was there. And at this particular meeting, you had to go up to the front. There was a podium, and you had to go up and speak from the podium. And I was still brand new. I'd been to maybe a couple of meetings. But I remember watching people up there and just thinking, what are they doing? So I thought, I'm going to go up there and I'm going to put on a clinic. I'm going to tell these people how this thing works. And I remember distinctly some guys sitting there, and they were older than me, and they just had their legs crossed and kind of had their arms folded, just put their head down and just kind of nodded their head back and forth. What I know now is they were saying, well, here's another one. His ego is, gushing out of his ears, and you know what they did afterwards? Because I was going to put on a clinic about, what real alcoholism really is, and you don't understand it. I grew up with it and that, and afterwards they came up and we talked a little bit, and before long I felt an arm around me and said, welcome, come on back, and, why don't you listen very carefully to what people say? Why don't you listen to what I say? What was he very kindly telling me? dude, you don't have anything to say yet. But the way he did it was attractive. It drew me in. It was a guy that came up and he understood. So that a widening circle that he uses, I think that's very graphic.
Yeah.
It's out and it's a big circle and we step in. So I really appreciate him, Bill Wilson, taking the time and getting to the detail, in his story so that we understand. I mean, there's a lot in there. He describes the condition. He describes the 12 steps. He describes, okay, this is very simple, but it's not easy, and this is why. And he goes on to explain all that. So that's a very powerful piece of literature, in my opinion. And I'm grateful that he was that open and giving to put that down. And I'll just reiterate one more time, that's his scouting report.
Mm-hmm.
He's come back from the abyss, and this is what he wrote. So that's good stuff.
Well, thanks, gentlemen, for being here with me and sharing of your hearts and your experiences and your wisdom. I know I appreciate it greatly, and I know our listeners will benefit a great deal. And to you who's listening, thank you for being here. Thank you for tuning in. We are excited to continue digging into the big book, and we are just getting started. So stay tuned. There's something that really just attracts people who are on this process, on this journey, attracts them together, brings them together. And so we invite you to get a sponsor. We invite you to do your work, whatever that might be. But don't try to do it alone. Don't think you're alone. We're cheering for you. Thanks for listening to this episode, and we will see you next time on the Do Your Dailies podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks for checking out this episode of the Do Your Dailies podcast. If you like what you hear and what we're talking about, please like and subscribe and share this show with your friends. That's the best way to support us bringing you more content. You can follow us on YouTube and Facebook at Do Your Dailies and on X at doyourdailies_. This podcast is brought to you by Hobble Creek Behavioral Health and is edited and produced by Motley Sounds.